To Joseph Downing, who's a senior lecturer in politics and international relations at Aston University and also a visiting fellow at the LSE European Institute. He joins us live from London. Great to have you on the programme, Joseph. So there were thousands of people demonstrating over the weekend in lots of cities, Paris and Lyon, against the rise of the far right and the national rally, of course. What impact could that have?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's become a bit of a ritual in France to do this, right? So we've seen in the past two presidential runoffs between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen, the far right head of the national rally. We've seen these protests, we've seen this mobilization of French society, but I have the feeling that each time we go through a round of mobilization like this, it becomes weaker. People become less panicked, people become fatigued by this constant call to boycott the extremes, right? They've had it now, you know, echoed in two presidential campaigns and now in a legislative campaign. And I mean, I just have that impression by speaking to people in France that it doesn't, there's a fatalism that's crept in to French politics where people, whether they're concerned or not, now just almost kind of see it as a foregone conclusion. So, you know, people in the metropole, they may mobilize, and I mean, tens of thousands is not a lot, right? If we think about the numbers that came out for the Yellow Vest protests and the pension reform protests in France. So these people, you know, they may mobilize, but, you know, does that mean that there's that appetite and ability for a broader mobilization in French society against these extremes when, and your previous contributor, I think, was picked up on this wonderfully, people like Kylian Mbappe, who are extremely rich, people like President Macron, again, who isn't short of a few euros, will tell people to boycott the extremes, but what are they providing as an alternative? And I think that's one of the real kind of difficult aspects for politics across the democratic world. This isn't just limited to France, is, you know, the centre and celebrities can tell individuals, you know, hope can beat hate. Okay, but what exactly are you giving people to hope for? Macron is telling people that, get used to it, you're going to be poorer. Your conditions at work are going to be worse. You're going to retire later. I mean, it isn't really the utopian vision that both the left, the extreme left and the extreme right are articulating for their version of a French society, where both of them are making these utopian promises of, you know, retiring at 60, better workers' rights, increased state intervention. But the problem is they don't have to govern. They don't have to deal with the complexities of state budgets, unfortunately. And I think if they did come to power, which I think is reasonably likely at some point in France, they would find themselves in a very similar sort of economic straitjacket as Macron has also found himself in.
Now, Joseph, you have written that Emmanuel Macron's decision to call a snap legislative election in France has been viewed as a major political gamble. And just make that link for us between the EU elections and these domestic politics, these elections.
Yeah, we have to be cautious, right? Because often European elections, the turnout's quite low, the fringes are overrepresented. People see them as really a kind of protest vote, whether the EU has any sway really over many of their domestic concerns, which often the EU doesn't. And if EU becomes a scapegoat, people go out and they cast a protest vote. However, the problem that France faces is that Macron is extremely unpopular. Not just that, but both the centre-left and the centre-right parties that have dominated French politics really since, you know, the foundation of the Fifth Republic by de Gaulle, have basically collapsed. There is no socialist party in France anymore. The centre-right was, until it dispensed with its leader for articulating this idea in public, muting the idea of a alliance with the far right. So really the centre's collapsed, and all you have left at the centre really is actually Macron. Problem is, Macron's really unpopular. And within his movement, it's so personalised around him, he's renamed it to try and make it a more generalisable political movement. But it's so personalised around him, it's very difficult to see if people see that it's something that can last beyond his current presidential tenure. He isn't eligible for re-election, in fact. So somebody has to come after Macron. So there are these massive tectonic shifts really within French politics that have been obscured by the fact that Macron came to power as a centrist. He came to power actually by bypassing the dominant party structure. He, in fact, contributed a lot to breaking the sort of party system in France. And this is where I think it is really worrying.
Joseph, really great to get your analysis. Joseph Downing joining us from over the pond in London. Thank you very much indeed.